you are looking at the very first game that entered my PlayStation console. That is right, when I bought my original PlayStation 3, I got it with 3 different games when I picked that motherfucker up at Best Buy. I got Resistance Fallen Man, I got a third game, which I'm going to talk about later in the series, and I got this one, and it's the very first one that made it into my console. I was also on a money spending spree that day, and I ended up getting my second flat screen TV for the house to go along with my shiny new PlayStation 3 Fat. No, really, I was still on a bubble TV at the end of my PlayStation 2's life cycle, and I had a flat screen TV in the bedroom, and I decided, you know what, it's time to upgrade the living room as well. So I went for the TV, and the same TV I used at that time is the same TV I still play on my PlayStation 3 today. Anyway, that was all the way back in 2007, so that shows how long it's been since this joint came out and why the graphics are so dated. Well, it's not as dated as YouTube auditors programming, but hey, fuck you. Now, here's the deal, man. Back in the day, this game came out during the console generation switch. Xbox was already on the 360, PlayStation 3 were coming out in a few months after this game was released. So, it was developed on PlayStation 2 and pretty much ported to every single console, including the Xbox 360. So what you're seeing, with the exception of the cutscenes, are PlayStation 2 grade graphics. Only the cutscenes were done for the next-gen consoles at the time. They were completely done independent from the prior generation, but the in-game graphics and shit were PlayStation 2 era graphics. So yes, this game is old, and rightfully so. It was a game made available at launch for PlayStation 3, so that shows how old this game really is. And since it received some positive acclaim at the time, I decided to give it a chance and let it be the first game in my console. And I will say that the opening cutscene with Nick Fury was pretty damn amazing at that time. You know, it's nothing like the graphics we have today, but back in the day, that shit was fucking amazing. You know, characters actually looked like they were talking the words when the consoles first came out. Not this nom 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 bullshit where the character moves his mouth looking like a Godzilla translation movie. You know what I'm talking about? Back in the old days on PlayStation 2, they would just move their mouths, but obviously it wasn't lip sync to the actual words and motion capturing and shit like that. That was part of the limitations you had back in the day, but on PlayStation 3 and 360, oh hell yeah, you can actually match up the voice with the cutscenes to what the words they were saying. Now, as for the gameplay, it's pretty much a button masher with RPG elements in the game. It's sort of a spiritual successor to the X-Men Legends series, which is pretty much identical in gameplay and style, except now you have the whole Marvel roster instead of just the X-Men characters. You get to use 25 characters or more if you have the Xbox version with the additional DLC and shit like that. Of those characters, you get to pick up to 4 people that you want to use in a party, and you can control any of those 4 characters in your party at any given time. All you need to do is select which one you want to use, and the game instantly switches you to that character and allows you to allow control. Each character has a set of powers that you can use, but you have to choose which powers you actually want to use though, as you're only restricted to using 3 in-game powers. In some character cases, they're going to have something to like 5 to 7 powers that you can actually choose from. So, you need to pick which of the best ones that suit your character and use those. You know, generally, the powers are your standard button mashing fare. You have area damage powers that hit multiple enemies, like Spider-Man swings a web around or some shit like that. You have things smashing the floor to create area damage. You have melee attacks, like Wolverine slicing people up. You have range powers, like Human Torch throwing fireballs, or the Silver Surfer hitting you with bolts of space magic or some shit. Essentially, every character has a group of powers similar to what they have in the comics. It's up to you to pick the best ones or the ones that you like using. That's the RPGist element to the game. Unless you want to use the cheat codes to rank up everyone immediately, you'll be earning XP and shit to get the ability to rank up your characters. Now, some characters are obviously better than others, some powers are obviously better than others, and it's a matter of picking who you want to fight with and who you want to button mash with. It's not fucking rocket science, it's just good fun. Now, the RPG elements mainly come from the decisions you need to make as to what powers you'll be using, along with some of the things that we do have in the game. Let's say you get a total of 6 powers on a character, with only 3 of them are usable in the game at any particular time. You also get a 4th power, which is your superpower that'll automatically become part of your character once you unlock it. But in any event, you need to pick which 3 powers do you want to use. You can either go with the best 3, or you can try and round out your character with different attacks. So for example, let's use Captain America. He has the ability to throw his shield at you from a distance. He has the ability to bash your face in up close with his shield. He has another ability that allows him to charge at an enemy with the shield, using it as a battering ram. Finally, he has a radio power where he could spin around, hit enemies in a small radius and shit like that. He also has 2 boost powers, where if you use these, you can either increase his strength and damage, or you can increase the defense of the entire team. From those 6 powers, you had to pick the 3 that you like the best. The superpower ability that they have is each unique to the character, although I'm not too fond of the implementation of this motherfucker. Each character has a superpower to use, and you need to build up that meter to use their superpower, and you do that by defeating all the enemies in the game. Each character has their own meter to fill up, so when I play with 4 characters, that means I have 4 super meters to fill up. And that's not a problem if you don't mind using all 4 characters. The problem though is that when you call in the superpower, instead of just unleashing the power of the character you control, it unleashes all the stored up powers of all 4 characters, which is fucking stupid. So, let's just take this example. Let's say you have all 4 characters that have their superpowers fully charged and they're ready to go. However, if I instruct just one character to use their superpower, all the characters will use their superpower, essentially blowing their load in one shot. Now, the only time the superpower is really useful is for a boss fight, when you need to be able to do some massive damage. Against a random enemy, there's absolutely no incentive. Against these low-level mooks, hell fucking no. So, if by accident you use your superpower and you end up blowing all your load on all your characters, you're gonna have to build that shit back up again. You better hope that you're able to build it back up again before the boss fight starts, because obviously the boss fight is where you want to unleash that motherfucker. Now, I don't know why the game didn't offer up an option for just one character to use their superpower as opposed to every single one. It makes no sense at all. And it almost makes using that power completely pointless during the game. Let's say, for example, you have 2 boss fights back to back. You have to decide, do you unleash the superpower on the first boss and hope you can rebuild it for the second boss? Or do you save that superpower for the second boss, or do you have to use it on the harder boss of the 2? If I manage to save up all 4 of my superpowers, which is pretty common because the enemies here are pretty easy to beat, you then have to decide when is the perfect time that I want to use this motherfucker. Normally, you would want to use that for a particular boss fight, but again, unless you know this game and unless you know what's coming around the corner, you have almost no reason to use that superpower unless you truly know you're facing the end level boss fight of a particular map. It's one of the things I would have loved for this game to improve on. But anyway, the story that we actually get here is sort of original, and it's sort of a mix of old comics and shit like that. Dr. Doom is fucking around again with another evil plan, and he's got a whole bunch of enemies together just because. No shit, that's what every fucking villain in the comic books do. They fuck around just because, no reason, no explanation, they just want to be assholes in the fucking comic books. Anyway, the story touches on some old comic book stories of the past, such as the Ghost Rider Mephisto storyline, to the Kree Skull Wars, to Galactus devouring planets. It's got all kinds of shit where you need to visit different parts of the Marvel Universe. You start on the Helicarrier, then you end up at the Omega Base, Murder World, Asgard, Atlantis, Mandarin's Palace, Mephisto's Realm. You fight against all the popular enemies, well, except for the X-Men ones like Magneto and shit like that. And at the end of the game, there are sort of multiple endings up in this motherfucker. The endings are shown in a comic book based form, and one of the things they do is they tell you that some of the decisions you made in the game led to other decisions after the fact. It doesn't show it, doesn't impact how you play. It's just sort of a comic book level storytelling ideal that shows you this is what happened after you made the choice that you made in the game. So it's sort of like a half-ass multiple ending kind of way. But it's the way they can say that they have multiple endings in this fucking game. I mean, either way, unquestionably, the game is fun. I had plenty of fun beating the shit out of these Mook level enemies with absolutely horrible intelligence. I mean, seriously, the enemies in this game are just flat out fucking stupid. I mean, I had fun taking on boss fights. They have a bit more intelligence, but they have a lot more cheesy moves that are meant to piss you off. But I mean, let's call a spade here. This is not Game of the Year material. It's not even fucking close. I mean, you could just take one character, press one button the entire game, and you can manage to beat pretty much the entire game. That's it. There's no challenge, and it's not meant to be challenging. It's meant to allow you to beat up the most amount of shit on a level without worrying about advanced controls. All you need is one button. The dialogue is cheesy, but then again, these are the comics we're talking about. You're not exactly gonna get the Last of Us level voice acting and shit. The stories combine a whole bunch of old comic stories into one gigantic story that sort of makes sense, but not really. I mean, it sort of makes sense, but you have to bash your head into the wall a couple hundred times, and then it starts to make sense up in this motherfucker. Anyway, they wanted to get as many characters as possible into the game, and they succeeded. It doesn't mean it's a well-designed game. It just means it's brain-numbing fun. That's it. The game is the highest form of a casual social game. You can play this with 3 friends local or online, although they shut the servers down a few years ago, so you won't be able to play online anymore. But even so, you can still have 3 friends come over and actually play this game. Now, think about that for a second. How many games offer up local co-op nowadays. I mean, most games took their co-op online so that 3 of your friends don't have to come over anymore. But here, you can still have friends come over to play the game. Not that people are going to go over to people's house anymore to play an 8-year-old fucking game. But at least you can play with multiple people. I mean, shit, my friends used to come over just to play this game because I was one of my first of my friends to actually buy a PlayStation 3 up in this motherfucker. So, they would come over to my place and we get a few games in on this joint, and then like halfway through the game we get bored of it and whatnot. But it was motherfucking fun at the goddamn time. In addition to that, another old school feature that the game had was cheat codes. Oh, the wonderful cheat codes up in this motherfucker. You know, the up, down, left, right type codes up in this bitch. You can unlock all the characters, all the money, rank up to level 99 or whatever, unlock God mode, whatever it is you wanted to do. All it did was require a code. Obviously, this defeats the purpose of just playing and enjoying the game. And part of the fun of this game was unlocking some of the hidden characters, you know, like Daredevil, Silver Surfer, Blade, or whatever the fuck it is. Part of the fun is ranking up and using your points where you can. Otherwise, the cheat codes just strip all the RPG elements out of the game in this motherfucker. But if you wanted to max out every single stat in the game, every single point, every character, it took, I believe, 8 full playthroughs, if I'm not mistaken, 8 or 9 or something like that. If you wanted to play the game 8 times in a row just to rank up every single stat, sure, be my guest. But for those of you who played it on normal and then on hard mode and defeated both, you got plenty of points, levels 30 through 50, so that you were able to beat the game in a normal run through. But those final levels where those stats grow exponentially, holy shit, that would take a long fucking time. But either way, it wasn't necessary because by level 40 or whatever the fuck the game had, you were already pretty powerful and you could easily beat the shit out of the game. There was no reason to use the actual cheat codes to beat this game other than you just felt like pressing up, down, left, right on the controller. Essentially, the game was already easy enough that you didn't need the cheat codes. They were just there as sort of an old school play on what games used to have and shit like that. Now, in the next 2 videos that are going to be coming up, I will have more to talk about when it comes to this particular property that Activision owns, and more on the Marvel vs. DC Comics debate that people will argue over like fucking children up in this bitch. So, those videos will certainly have more entertaining shit to talk about. But for this video, knowing it's the very first game that I put in my PlayStation, knowing it's the very first campaign I beat on PlayStation 3 when I bought it, it brings back so many memories. And it's funny because when I popped this motherfucker into the console, I got the urge to do a whole nother run through on this joint because it's that goddamn fun to play. It's not the best game ever made. It's not Game of the Year contender. Shit, it's not even Game of the Week contender. But it's quality entertainment that any casual player would love to have fun with 20 to 30 hours of gameplay up in this motherfucker, man. But anyway, I got 4 more videos for you guys this week on the Goodbye PlayStation 3 series. So as always, rate, comment, subscribe, and all that good shit. And I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video.